Assyrian treasures. In 2017, a group of troops in Iraq discovered treasures from ancient Assyria. The artifacts were found inside a network of underground tunnels carved beneath the war-ravaged city of Mosul. The tunnels were dug below a mound that was left over from 2014, when ISIS blew apart a 12th century mosque. The Nabi Yunus Mosque was incredibly important because it was supposedly the tomb of the prophet Jonah. But ISIS blew it up, and then they dug tunnels underneath it as part of their defensive strategy in the city. In the wake of destruction, the tunnels turned out to be a good thing. The terrorists dug tunnels so deep that they slipped beneath centuries of mud brick buildings, way down to an ancient temple carved into the bedrock. The temple was built over 2,000 years earlier. After the soldiers uncovered it, they called in archaeologists to do some investigating and to save what they could. They found carved stone reliefs of mysterious animals and ceremonies. They also identified the entrance to the Assyrian temple. Sebastian Ray from the Iraq Emergency Heritage Management Program at the British Museum said the reliefs they discovered were extremely unique. They contained features never seen before in Assyrian artwork, meaning the palace could have belonged to a previously unknown ruler. Unfortunately, we don't know whatever became of this discovery. It was international news in 2017, but since then, there hasn't been a word about it. It looks like after the temple was unearthed, political turmoil in Iraq caused any additional archaeological work to be suspended indefinitely. Assyrian artifacts in abandoned tunnels. When extremists from the Islamic State terrorist group began taking over territories in Iraq and Syria, they set to work actively destroying ancient sites and artifacts. They went on a rampage and proudly posted videos of their destructive acts on social media. In a strange turn of events, however, they accidentally uncovered a treasure trove of Assyrian artifacts while digging tunnels beneath the streets of Mosul, and for whatever reason, they left the items untouched. Faleh al-Shumari, head of the Antiquities Authority in Mosul, said that Iraqi government officials already knew about the objects beneath the shrine of Nabi Yunus, which is the prophet Jonah, which date back to the 8th century BC. The site is also home to a palace belonging to a Neo-Assyrian king, dating back to the 7th century BC. Archaeologists had gone to excavate on several occasions, but tried to keep their actions hush-hush in the 90s, and then in 2004 and 2005. Since funding dried up and there was nowhere safe to put them. So they covered everything back up. The goal was to go back and excavate everything when it was safe to move it to a secure location. Iraqi soldiers then went down into the tunnels and rediscovered the artifacts. Among other things, there were 2 sculptures of the winged bulls of Nineveh and other sculptures of women and walls covered with cuneiform inscriptions. Countless historically valuable artifacts have been found in Iraq, which is considered one of the cradles of civilization. Many Iraqis are proud of the country's rich history and are still trying to recover many artifacts that have been lost or stolen. Saddam Hussein's alien portal. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. There is a rumor that the invasion was launched because the military wanted to take control of a portal to an alien world. The portal was supposedly found by Saddam Hussein underneath an ancient Sumerian pyramid called a ziggurat. Michael Sala, an alleged expert on extraterrestrial politics from Australia, says the portal was used thousands of years ago by extraterrestrial beings from a faraway planet. Michael says these aliens have been interfering with human politics since the dawn of civilization. There is no evidence of this other than hearsay and speculation. But the speculation has been around for decades. The US and Britain supposedly used weapons of mass destruction as a fake pretext to topple Saddam, gain control over the region, and learn more about the alien portal. Unfortunately, we don't know if a portal was ever found, or if one was discovered, what became of it. The Sumerians had allegedly built this mysterious portal with help from the ancient race of star beings known as the Anunnaki, who were worshipped by the people of Mesopotamia around 5,000 years ago. Project Azorian. Project Azorian was a secret mission conducted by the CIA during the Cold War to pick a Soviet submarine off the floor of the ocean using a massive claw. The plan involved a billionaire, a giant ship over 600 feet long, and a significant amount of stealth. It also took 6 years to complete. The mission began in 1968 when the Soviet submarine K-129 went missing in the Pacific Ocean. The Soviets and the Americans were searching high and low for the missing sub. After 2 months, the Soviet Union gave up, but the United States did not. They wanted to find the wreckage of the submarine to get their hands on the nuclear weapons it was carrying. They found the submarine 1,500 miles from Hawaii at a depth of 16,500 feet. At the time, no civilization on Earth had recovered such a massive piece of debris from such an incredible depth. This was a risky project, but the United States believed it was worth it because of the information they could get from the submarine. This was at the height of the Cold War, when everyone thought the nuclear bombs were going to drop. The United States needed as much intelligence as it could get its hands on, and projects like these could give either side the competitive edge. The CIA used the cover of pretending to mine the sea floor for manganese nodules, sponsored by the famous billionaire Howard Hughes. In the end, only part of the submarine ended up being retrieved because the huge claws designed to lift it broke apart much of the vessel. But the truth is, we have no idea what information they got. Much of the findings from the mission are still classified, but we do know that several remains of crew members were brought up and given military burials, and the CIA gave the video footage to Russia 20 years later. Sea monster attack. A few years ago, Scottish engineers discovered the wreckage of a German submarine from World War I sitting at the bottom of the ocean while they were laying undersea power lines. It turns out this mysterious submarine wreck may just be the notorious UB-85, the German U-boat that was attacked by a sea monster. As outrageous as that sounds, the story has been going around for over 100 years. It started on April 30th, 1918, when Captain Krech and his crew were captured by the HMS Coropsus, a British warship. The British thought it was strange that they had captured the submarine crew so easily. When they began to interrogate the Germans, they told the British that their submarine couldn't dive because it had sustained serious damage when attacked by a beast from the bottom of the ocean. According to the eyewitness reports, the mysterious monster had horns, huge teeth, and evil eyes. The creature was so big that when it climbed onto the side of the submarine, the vessel tilted and nearly flipped upside down. The creature took chunks out of their forward gun with its teeth, scratched up the side of their vessel, and forced the crew to abandon ship and surrender to the British. But just how much of this story is true? The submarine definitely existed. These people were certainly captured, and the wreckage is still at the bottom of the ocean. However, unless somebody dives down and checks out the hull of the submarine, we'll never know if it does indeed have claw marks from some kind of terrible monster. The Cave Giant. A United States Special Forces team supposedly killed a giant in the year 2002 in the desert mountains of Afghanistan. The elite tactical team was part of Operation Enduring Freedom, engaged in desperate battles against the Taliban in Kandahar. However, the soldiers wound up fighting a completely unexpected adversary. According to the story, the men were high up in the mountains on a mission when they came across a cave. It was a peculiar grotto with a smell like rotten death wafting out of it. When the soldiers entered the cave to see what the source of the stink was, they were attacked by a giant. It was allegedly 13 feet tall, with hair like orange fire, 6 fingers on each hand, and it had 2 sets of sharp teeth. The monster wielded a huge spear and killed multiple soldiers before the rest of the unit brought it down with gunfire. After the team killed the giant, the army took away its body in a helicopter, and it was never seen again. Its corpse is supposedly hiding in a military installation somewhere deep underground, hidden under lock and key. It's important to remember that the Department of Defense has gone on record saying they have no information about a Special Forces member being killed by a giant in Kandahar. As far as the military is concerned, it never happened. The Ninja Lantern Shark. With this cool name, the Ninja Lantern Shark does not disappoint. With a jet black color and bulging pale eyes, this deep-sea dweller looks as though it's rocking a Halloween costume. They have a menacing look about them, like they're about to jump out of the shadows, and they're kind of small so they can move a lot faster. In fact, they are only about 18 inches long. These sharks can be vicious and writhe into their prey with the ferocity of their larger cousins featured in Dawes. Thankfully, it's rare for them to come into contact with humans. In fact, you wouldn't have to worry about finding yourself face-to-face with one of these guys anytime soon. And that's because these ninjas don't typically spend time in the shallow end. They usually live about 1,000 feet below the surface. so they are not the typical creatures that scuba divers would find. Found in the deep waters off the coast of Central America, these sharks get their name because of their glowing organs, called photophores. They tend to balance out the habitat they live in, which is usually pitch black, enabling them to move around and sneak up on prey. And while there are other lantern sharks that light up from the inside, these guys are the only ones with a darker skin to camouflage. The Giant of Kandahar. A team of U.S. Special Forces supposedly discovered a biblical giant with flaming red hair in Afghanistan. Like most of the craziest military discoveries, this one has never been proven. The Army denies it fervently, and we've never seen physical evidence of the giant they supposedly encountered. But here's the story of what happened. It was the summer of 2002 when American Special Forces soldiers were operating in Kandahar. An entire platoon was murdered by a massive giant that weighed a whopping 1,100 pounds, stood 12 feet tall, and wielded a gigantic sword. They found the giant living in a cave and caught it by surprise. It reacted violently, ripping the soldiers to shreds. The giant was then discovered by a different team who went into the Rocky Hills to locate the missing Special Forces unit. The second team was able to ambush and kill the beast. The body was then taken away by a transport aircraft and never seen again. Some have claimed the U.S. Army came across one of the last living Nephilim from the Book of Genesis, the abominable offspring of gods and human women. Project Horizon. Project Horizon was part of a study in 1959 to build a secret base on the moon. This was a time when the United States Department of the Army, along with the Navy and the Air Force, had total control over the space program. The project aimed to create a lunar outpost from which the military could practice surveillance of the Earth. It was also supposed to be a base for moon exploration as well as military operations, things like bombing the enemy from space. Essentially, the U.S. wanted to figure out a way that they could take the moon for themselves, build a military outpost on it, and then use that outpost as a kind of cosmic missile depot, where they could rain down nukes to anywhere on the planet. The way the military was thinking at the time, a moon base was necessary for national security and had to be built as soon as possible. The experts who conducted the study estimated it would take $6 billion to complete the moon base. However, Project Horizon never got off the ground. President Eisenhower rejected the proposal and then transferred the space program into the responsibility of the civilian agency we know today as NASA. The Assaro Mudmen. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, one of the most primitive frontiers on Earth, there is an ancient tribe of people known as the Assaro Mudmen. They are still living life as if in the Stone Age with almost no contact with the outside world. There are about 90 tribes living in the area, but the Assaro are arguably the most terrifying. They practice a bizarre form of psychological warfare in which they cover their bodies with mud and put on scary clay masks with demonic faces painted on them to scare their enemies. The origin of their horrifying appearance is unknown. Some say they've been doing this for centuries. It all started when the Assaro warriors were forced to retreat during a battle and hide in a river. They all held their breath and covered themselves with mud and clay from the bottom. When they thought the coast was clear, they emerged from the river at night and tried to run. The enemy caught up to them, but when they saw their pale white bodies, they thought they were evil spirits from the forest and were so afraid they ran away. And so began the tradition for the Assaro to dress up like ghosts to terrify their enemies. Others say the mud came about because of tribal fights in the 1800s, with warriors wearing the spooky disguises to hide their identities when assassinating people. They would also cover themselves with mud and wear their scary masks and bamboo fingernails to sneak around and scare the daylights out of their victims. Valiant Thor. On March 15, 1957, an alien from Venus supposedly landed on planet Earth in the city of Alexandria, Virginia. The alien, who introduced himself as Valiant Thor, demanded to speak with the President of the United States of America, Dwight Eisenhower. However, the alleged alien didn't look anything like an extraterrestrial monster. He just appeared to be a tall man who stepped out from a spaceship that landed in the middle of a field. Soon after landing, Valiant Thor was taken to the Pentagon. He supposedly told the leaders of the United States that he was a representative from his own world and that he was on Earth to help. Apparently, he also had all kinds of fantastic powers. He was able to restructure himself on a molecular level, sort of like teleportation. He also had 6 fingers on each hand, not unlike the Giant in Kandahar, and supposedly had copper oxide in his veins instead of blood. But how much of this unbelievable story is true? Unfortunately, nobody really knows. An alien ship was said to have been recorded on video, but there is no evidence that it exists. There are also pictures from 1957 when the alien was supposedly among Pentagon staff. But these images just show a man who has never been identified. Atomic scale wires. During a study that involved examining the properties of silver on an atomic scale, researchers from Australia, China, and Japan accidentally developed a wire just 1 atom wide. As part of the experiment, the team put nanoparticles of silver on the outside of tiny rods with channels inside and tested them in regular air instead of a vacuum as they normally would. Queensland University of Technology professor Dimitri Goldberg explained that when we do this in a vacuum or in some inert atmosphere, nothing happens. But they did it in air, so the atoms from silver particles diffused very fast, and they diffused inside the channels. The team expected the silver to react with the air and form silver oxide, but instead the atoms self-organized within the channels, forming 200 atom-thin wires, each one about 1/5 as thick as a human hair. They definitely weren't trying to do this on purpose. The accidental creation opens the doorway for the development of atomic-scale wires, something scientists have been trying to achieve for over 20 years. Additional research shows that the silver nanowires could possibly be used as thermal switches. At a certain temperature, the material became an insulator. This is not common for silver. The next goal is to make the wires even smaller. The KGB alien. In the 1960s, the Russian KGB allegedly went on an expedition to Egypt. While they were there, digging through old temples and ruined tombs, they came across the bones of an alien. The mission was organized through Soviet intelligence as part of something codenamed Project ISIS. The goal of this secret project was to uncover the truth behind the tomb of the visitor, meaning the tomb of the ancient alien. The Soviet intelligence agency supposedly recruited famous Russian neurologist and astrophysicist Viktor Ivanovich as their scientific advisor. The Soviets believed that the ancient Egyptians had some deep knowledge of alien technology, and that this knowledge could be learned if they could only find the right archaeological treasure. An estimated 20,000 Soviet military units descended on Egypt, along with a team of researchers from the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Their main interest was a tomb discovered hidden inside one of the Giza pyramids, a tomb that's never been announced to the public. When the Soviet scientists entered the supposed tomb, they found the mummified corpse of a creature that was clearly not from our world. They also discovered mysterious Egyptian hieroglyphs carved on the walls. When they decoded these hieroglyphs, the researchers were shocked to see they described a prophecy in which the mummified aliens' friends would soon return to the planet. The inhuman remains were dated at about 13,000 years old, which would mean the alien had been on the planet for almost 10,000 years before the pyramid was even built. There's no definitive proof that any of this happened, but the idea of aliens in ancient Egypt does match up with Egyptian mythology. In Egyptian myth, a family of gods came down from the stars to bring them wisdom and knowledge. Osiris is said to have arrived on Earth from a flying boat descended from the stars, in what we might think of as a flying saucer. The Secret Army. One of the weirdest secret military programs ever has been underway for the past 10 years or more. It doesn't have a name that we know of, but the program has managed to build the biggest secret army in the world. According to the report from Newsweek, the Pentagon has so far enlisted at least 60,000 men and women into its secret army. These people are working among us in low-profile jobs with secret identities. Any member of the secret army could even be your neighbor. They are assigned with carrying out foreign and domestic assignments in the real world and even on the internet. They have private businesses, some of them work in the upper echelons of big companies, and they are all loyal to the United States government. The need for the secret army has a lot to do with the modern world we live in. It's why thousands of these individuals have fake personas and undertake operations online as part of the Pentagon's Cyber Warfare Task Force. It's not clear what these people do, but if you're up to something online that the government doesn't like, chances are one of these secret soldiers will find out about it. The truth is that nobody knows the full size of the program, what kind of jurisdiction these secret civilians have, or just what companies government spies are operating in. Parachuting dogs. During World War II, there was an entire regiment of parachute dogs. These brave animals even fought during D-Day alongside the Allies. Before this, dogs were used quite frequently during the war. Dogs were used as scouts and were trained to stay calm around loud noises like aircraft propellers and gunshots, and could sniff out explosives. But these dogs specifically were trained to wear parachutes and jump out of airplanes, and after a while, they didn't even seem to mind. There are 3 dogs whose stories have carried on even today. They are Rainy, Bing, and Glenn. Bing survived World War II and was awarded with the Dickin Medal, the animal version of the Victoria Cross. When he died in 1955, the veteran parachuting dog was buried in a cemetery in the northeast of London and given full animal honors. There is also a replica of him at the Parachute Regiment and Airborne Forces Museum in Duxford. The other dogs were not so lucky. Glenn died on D-Day while fighting with his handler, Emile Cortel. They are buried together in the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery. The final dog, Rainy, was the only female parachuting dog who fought during the war, a German shepherd who battled bravely but unfortunately lost her life. Ancient Edomite Temple. A drone that was used at a military training site in Israel accidentally discovered an ancient structure from 2,200 years ago. The small drone identified an ancient temple complete with a rare incense altar. They believe the cathedral was likely created by the mysterious Edomites from the Bible. The Edomites were not so different from the Israelites, both settled and resettled in the Holy Land throughout the centuries. However, the Edomite kingdom came to a screeching halt when they were destroyed by the Babylonians in the 6th century BC. The few remaining survivors gathered in the southern hills of Judea and settled there, but they never grew to become a powerful civilization ever again. They built their tiny towns and their temples and changed their name to the Idumeans, but they were eventually assimilated and became Jewish. They were such a small group that very few Edomite palaces and temples remain standing today. Archaeologists say similar structures like the one found at the military training site can be counted on one hand. It's an incredibly rare find, and all thanks to a drone survey. One of the most incredible things found here was the incense altar, decorated with images of a bull. The bull was likely a representation of the mysterious deity worshipped by the Idumeans before they converted to Judaism. The altar may have been used in unknown rituals, perhaps even in blood sacrifices. New natural blue. New colors are actually hard to come by, and natural new colors are crazy rare. The color blue rarely occurs in nature, making naturally occurring blue pigments really difficult to find. In fact, many seemingly blue colors are actually combinations of reds and purples rather than true blue. But a newly discovered cyan blue variation could potentially be used as an alternative to synthetic brilliant blue food dye. Detected by chemists as part of a collaborative project between the University of California, Davis and Mars Wrigley, the color is sourced from red cabbage, which contains water-soluble pigments called anthocyanins. Only a small amount of the vegetable's anthocyanins are blue, prompting the researchers to use specially designed enzymes to turn some of the other anthocyanins into the desired shade. They designed the enzyme with the help of a powerful computer, which sorted through trillions of potential protein sequences to come up with an efficient combination. The resulting cyan blue pigment is reportedly nearly identical to the industry's go-to synthetic dye, known as Brilliant Blue FCS, or E133. Artificial blues have proven problematic, often posing environmental or durability issues. Some, like cobalt blue, even turned out to be toxic, and Prussian blue released cyanide. The new pigment comes not long after scientists at Oregon University accidentally discovered yin min blue, a so-called near-perfect blue pigment, in 2009. It was the first such discovery in 200 years, and came while the researchers were observing the electrical properties of heated manganese oxide, a project that had nothing to do with looking for a pigment. Admiral Richard Byrd. Admiral Richard Byrd undertook a historic exploration of the North Pole in 1947. His is one of the strangest cases in U.S. Navy history. What exactly happened during his flight is unknown, as his story has been warped and transformed in the years since it happened. Officially, nothing strange happened at all, but unofficially, the Admiral saw something impossible. Admiral Byrd supposedly flew beyond his maps. His compass got all messed up, and he found himself no longer in a world of ice and snow. He was in a tropical environment. He saw huge beasts roaming the ground below him, and he had no idea where in the world he was. He eventually backtracked and made it back to the North Pole, but he was dazed and confused. Some have suggested that Admiral Byrd didn't fly beyond the North Pole, but accidentally entered through a gateway into the hollow Earth. The Admiral somehow accidentally found a portal to the secret landscape hiding beneath the surface. This is a place that's never been officially documented, but is supposedly home to lost civilizations and never-before-seen monsters. There are those who believe a secondary world exists underneath the surface of this one, and that the only way in is through a tunnel hidden somewhere in the North Pole or Antarctica. And now for number 6. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Kyle Schreiner and Satan Romruin. Thanks so much for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos about strange history and discoveries. Iran Flight 655. In 1988, the U.S. Navy made a horrible mistake. They shot down Iran Air Flight 655 by accident, killing 290 people. Not just any people, but innocent civilians. The USS Vincennes was fighting with Iranian gunboats when it saw the plane on its radar and confused the commercial liner for a fighter jet. The flight did not respond to the distress signal sent by the Navy, so they fired a missile at it. Everyone on board was killed within a handful of seconds. This wasn't exactly a secret project, but it was a terrifying moment in U.S. military history that people don't really know about today. One of the main reasons why it was so easy to mistake the commercial aircraft for a fighter jet is that in the 1970s, the U.S. had sold 80 F-14 fighter jets to Iran. They knew they had a big arsenal of planes. Plus, the airport where the fighter jet took off from was used by the military in Iran. In any case, this fueled tensions between the countries for years. It wasn't until almost a decade later, in 1996, that the government paid Iran $131.8 million in compensation for the mistake, with $62 million of it going to the families of the victims. It's scary to think that there are other militaries all over the world that could easily make the same mistake. Nazi breeding program. The Lebensborn were the result of a secret Nazi breeding program that lasted from between 1935 and 1945, part of a plan to design racially pure children that could be used by Hitler's Third Reich. It was quite horrifying, with the program encouraging fit women who were racially correct in the eyes of the Nazis to bear children that encouraged Aryan ideals. The program had special birthing facilities, secret identities, and they even stole over an estimated 200,000 children. But the program came around even before World War II broke out. It started in the First World War, when the male population of Germany fell into a sharp decline because of all the casualties. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he needed more men. In 1935, Heinrich Himmler came up with the idea that to dissuade women from getting abortions, if they had racially pure German children, they could simply hand them over to the state and they would take care of them. But things only got worse. As more and more soldiers were killed, there was a systematic need for more healthy fighting men. And so the experiment went a bit out of control, with the Germans moving to kidnapping and stealing kids from orphanages to add them to their ranks. The child-napping mania went on until the war finally ended, resulting in a whole lot of orphans and confused children who didn't know who their parents were. Another sad reminder of other damages that war can bring. The Korean UFO Sickness. In May of 1951, just a year after the Korean War kicked off, something very strange happened north of Seoul. Private First Class Francis P. Wall and his regiment were stationed near Chorwon when they had what may have been one of the best documented extraterrestrial encounters in history. Francis and his team were preparing to bombard a village with heavy artillery when out of nowhere, a ball of light came toward them down the mountain. It was a pulsing, blinking, unidentifiable orb of light. The soldiers thought it kind of looked like a craft, almost like a hovering jack-o'-lantern. It continued down to the village, just around the time explosions began from the artillery. In an interview from 1987, Francis told the Center for UFO Studies he witnessed the ball of light weaving in and out of the artillery airbursts. It was completely unharmed, glowing orange, and sometimes pulsating with a blue and green light. What's really crazy is that the object was solid. Private Francis fired at the object with a rifle and could hear the ding of the bullets hitting metal, but his shots weren't doing any damage. Then, without warning, the object attacked the soldiers. It swept a pulsing wave of light over them and then was gone. The men who were attacked by this unidentified object suffered major radiation sickness. 3 days later, the entire company had to be given medical treatment. They were suffering from dysentery and had a high white blood cell count, the telltale signs of radiation. We still don't know what the men saw out there in Korea, but it was almost certainly a visitor from outer space. Either that, or an experimental weapon. And now for number 5. But first, it's shout-out time! We'd like to give a big thank you to Claire Harrison and Eric P. for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Lost Golden City. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities has just announced the discovery of the ruins of what archaeologists call the Lost Golden City of Luxor. Dating back more than 3,000 years, the ancient metropolis was found buried in sand last September. It's the largest ancient Egyptian city ever uncovered, according to archaeologist Zahi Hawass, who led the team that unexpectedly made the discovery while searching for Tutankhamun's mortuary temple. During the dig, the team was surprised to encounter zigzagging mud walls measuring as much as 10 feet tall. Without meaning to, they had found a city that other archaeologists had tried and failed to find. In a statement, archaeologist Betsy Bryan described the site as the most important discovery in Egypt since King Tut's tomb was found in 1922. Speaking with NBC, Hawass said that the Golden City will help researchers better understand life during ancient Egypt's Golden Age. So far, the team has unearthed rings, scarabs, colored pottery, tools, and other artifacts dating back between 1391 and 1353 BC, during the reign of Amenhotep III. The site contains storage houses, grinding stones, and areas for meat production, offering an unprecedented look at everyday life in an industrial Egyptian city. Oddly, the archaeologists found a skeleton with its arms outstretched and a rope around the knees. They have yet to come up with an explanation for the odd burial and have several other lingering questions that they hope to answer through further excavations at the site. The Gorman Dog Fight. In the early 1950s, Captain Edward J. Ruppelt investigated UFO reports from the U.S. Air Force. In his own words, the Gorman Dog Fight remained one of the classic UFO sightings involving military personnel. The incident has never been given a proper explanation. Veteran World War II fighter pilot George Gorman had a 27-minute encounter with a mysterious white orb while flying above Fargo, North Dakota. In 1948, Gorman told his local newspaper that he had never seen anything like it. He also admitted that if it was anyone besides him who reported seeing such a thing, they would be denounced as a crazy lunatic. What makes the incident so legit is that Gorman was a reliable source. The encounter lasted nearly 30 minutes, and it was corroborated by other reputable sources. Gorman came upon the unidentified object at about 9 o'clock at night while flying his P-51 fighter. He got to within about 1,000 yards of it, but he couldn't really tell what it was. It only looked to be about 8 inches in diameter and was a clear white ball of light that blinked on and off and zoomed through the air with incredible speed. There was a brief chase and the orb took Gorman up to 7,000 feet. Then it turned around and buzzed straight towards his plane. Gorman narrowly avoided a collision and the ball of light zoomed just over top of him. Then, when things were really heating up, his plane stalled at 14,000 feet. And the bright object took off into space. Gorman wasn't the only one who saw the mysterious object either. Air traffic controllers witnessed it as well, corroborating Gorman's story. It's unclear to this day what the white ball of light was. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Project Artichoke. Project Artichoke was a secret research mission undertaken by the CIA to find new interrogation methods. It started in 1951 with scientists looking into how they could use things like hypnosis, morphine injections, and LSD to put people into vulnerable states and even produce amnesia. It was essentially a mind control program, with the Army, Navy, and Air Force all being in on it. A memo from the project dated January of 1952 describes how the researchers were attempting to gain control of a person so that they would do exactly what they were told, even against the laws of nature and self-preservation. To see which methods worked best, the military procured racial minorities, homosexuals, and prisoners, then took them to secret bases throughout Asia and Europe to do the actual testing. What they found was that by using certain drugs on a person, when the interrogation was over, the subject would be left with a foggy sensation of amnesia. This meant that the CIA could kidnap people, interrogate them, then wipe their brains so that it was as if the kidnapping had never happened at all. Project Artichoke officially came to an end in 1953, though the work was continued through a new project that became known as MK-Ultra. The Great Emu War. The Great Emu War was a very real war fought by Australian soldiers. It happened in the years between World War I and World War II. The Australian government was having a difficult time finding things for their veterans to do when they got home. There was a soldier settlement scheme that started in 1915, in which soldiers were given plots of land to farm. This worked out for about 5,000 soldiers, who went on to cultivate wheat and sheep and became farmers. However, by 1920, the government had purchased a whopping 90,000 acres of land and still had more veterans that needed things to do. So they started giving them land in pretty crummy areas, like in the middle of the desert, where it was a nightmare to try and farm anything. To make things worse, the Great Depression hit in 1929, and the farmers found themselves in trouble. But here is where the emus came into play. There were tens of thousands of them living in West Australia, and the soldiers had basically stolen their territory. They were a protected species until 1922, when they were causing such problems for the farmers that they were reclassified as vermin. That's a pretty big switch. So, seeing as these guys used to be soldiers, they got to work trying to get rid of them. The Australian military was also called in to fight the rampaging birds, and it was a disaster. The army used over 2,500 rounds of ammunition, military vehicles, and everything else, but they only managed to kill 200 emus in the first few battles. It became such an expensive and useless effort that the troops were recalled, and the emus were declared the winners of the war. And now for number 5, but first want to give a big shout out to Princess Sophie 83 and Rachel Perry. Big thank you to both of you, and thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you want to see more videos like these, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join us. Human footprints in Utah. Ancient human footprints were discovered on a remote Air Force training site in the middle of the Utah desert in July of 2022. Researcher Thomas Urban with the Cornell Tree Ring Laboratory made the discovery on an old military property. He was driving across the land on his way to an archaeological site when he looked out his window and saw the tracks. He stopped his truck and got out to take a closer look and discovered the bare footprints of humans preserved in the Utah salt flat. Urban returned the next day with a team of scientists. Together, they identified 88 human footprints from adults and children. The most shocking part of the discovery was that the footprints were made 12,000 years ago. These tracks were left behind during the late Pleistocene era, when Ice Age beasts still roamed North America. This was long before the Great Salt Lake Desert of Utah was ever dry. Darren Duke, Urban's colleague, said that it seemed as though the people had been walking through shallow water. During the final days of the last ice age, the lake started to dry up and it became a wetland. This lasted about 10,000 years, during which humans lived in the swampy area because it was likely full of food. During that time, a group of people left their footprints in the muck. Sand flowed into the tracks they left behind, and then a layer of mud kept their prints intact. They remained preserved all this time, but no one knew they were there on the old military installation. Firefly sound signals. While wandering around a tropical rainforest with microphones, gathering data for a study on bats' echolocation, a team unexpectedly detected similar high-frequency sounds coming from fireflies. Bats and fireflies have something in common. Led by Tel Aviv University professor Yossi Yovel, the accidental discovery took the whole study in a new direction. They examined 3 different firefly species that are common in Vietnam, and one from Israel. Using high-speed video, they found that the fireflies produce the sound by moving their wings, but the fireflies themselves can't hear this frequency. That doesn't make any sense. But bats eat fireflies, so this sound that the fireflies are making is an evolved warning signal against bats. This ability may serve as additional protection in cases where the Firefly's glow fails to deter bats because they can't see very well. Its musical armor, warning signals that the sender itself cannot detect, is well documented for plants, but in animals, this is quite rare. The musical battle between bats and fireflies continues. The fall of Baghdad. In 2003, some of the greatest artifacts of the ancient world were looted and destroyed at the Iraqi National Museum in Baghdad. This museum was home to the greatest collection of Mesopotamian art dating back 5,000 years. Some of the amazing archaeological treasures here included the Warka vase, crafted from limestone in the ancient city of Uruk when the Sumerians were still inventing writing. Also, the Lion of Nimrud, an ivory statue of a lion attacking a Nubian, a true masterpiece of Phoenician art. In 2003, the museum was broken into while U.S. military personnel stood by and watched. Neil MacGregor, the director of the British Museum, called it the greatest catastrophe involving a major museum since World War II. Museum staff begged the Americans to take action, but there was nothing they could do as the museum was ripped to pieces. The building wasn't secured until 6 days later. Many treasures were lost, including the Warka vase, the Lion of Nimrud, a statue of King Entemena of Lagash, and even a copper figure from the reign of Akkadian king Naram Sin from 2250 BC. Some have speculated the looting may have been a cover for the U.S. Army to infiltrate the museum and steal lost relics they believed to have mystical powers. Super Secret Command Bunker. The Pentagon once planned to create a super secret command bunker 3,500 feet beneath the surface of Washington, D.C. It was to be unlike any fortification built by human hands. It would be a deep underground command center where they could withstand multiple hits from nuclear warheads in case of an attack. The proposal was made by Assistant Secretary of Defense Charles Hitch in January of 1962. The proposal involved detailed plans to create the command post beneath Washington, D.C. that would be easily accessible to the National Command Authority. These are the top brass people who make all the most important decisions in government. They are also the people who need to be involved when it comes to ordering a nuclear strike. These people include the President, the Secretary of Defense, and a handful of approved deputies. In case of nuclear war, it would be critical that these individuals remain alive. What better way to keep them alive than by stuffing them into a super secret bunker? The bunker never did get built, especially since in 1961 the military had already started building a pair of hardened command centers that served a similar purpose as the proposed DC base. Wartime aliens. It was November of 1944, near the end of World War II, when the airmen of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron found themselves facing off against aliens. Lieutenant Fred Ringwald was the first one to see the unidentified flying objects. He was an observer for his pilot, Lieutenant Ed Schluter. They were flying across the Rhine Valley along the border of France and Germany when Ringwald saw the lights. There were about 10 of them in a row, glowing orange. The ground radar registered nothing. It was quite strange because the airmen could see the lights plain as day, but the radar was detecting nothing. Just when they thought the lights were something natural playing a trick on them, they formed a T shape and followed their plane at 1,000 feet before mysteriously vanishing. Weeks later, on December 22nd, 2 more flight crews saw the exact same thing. The unidentified flying objects were bright orange and were seen rising from the surface to 10,000 feet in the air. The lights would then vanish, then appear in a new spot, and then vanish again. These objects have never been officially identified, and there were more sightings of them all the way into January. Some say they were flares, some say weather balloons, but others are convinced it was aliens. Secret flying machine. A group of United States soldiers were on a mission in Afghanistan at some point in the early 2010s, and rumor has it that 8 troops discovered a mysterious flying machine inside of a cave. The machine is believed to be 5,000 years old, an ancient piece of technology protected by some kind of mysterious energy barrier. After the soldiers removed the flying machine, they all supposedly disappeared. And now, nobody has any idea what happened to them or where the alleged machine went. This sounds kind of like a movie. None of this has been confirmed by the military. Some historians believe the flying machine was likely something called a vimana, a legendary propulsion vehicle spoken of in sacred Indian texts. The Vimana was described as a chariot of the gods, something that could carry the Hindu gods across the skies and beyond. Other texts describe the Vimana as a floating temple, a massive palace 7 stories tall that could fly. Most modern archaeologists and historians believe the newly discovered Vimana is nothing but a fairy tale. However, others think the flying machine should be considered evidence of highly advanced technology utilized by the ancients. It may have been an anti-gravity machine, something that could use gravity itself as part of its propulsion system. Though, of course, how ancient Indians made such a machine is beyond understanding. Whether the military really found one hiding in Afghanistan is unknown. Turtle fossil in church. While searching through the ruins of a church that was destroyed by an earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, sculptor Paul Deans happened upon a 35-million-year-old turtle fossil embedded in the core of a limestone pillar. Built between 1881 and 82, the Oxford Terrace Baptist Church sustained extensive damage in the 2011 Canterbury earthquakes. When it was demolished, its pillars were hollowed out for the construction of a new church that opened in 2017. Deans received several pieces of the pillar's cores last year to use in his work, leading him to the rather unexpected discovery. Dr. Paul Schofield, senior curator of natural history at the Canterbury Museum, noticed that the unnamed ancient turtle species resembles another turtle fossil that a builder found while quarrying limestone in Oamaru in 1880. He concluded that both fossils were likely extracted from the same quarry and may contain parts of the same animal. That would be a coincidence. Schofield said that turtle fossils are really rare in New Zealand. No similar turtle fossils have been found in Oamaru in more than 150 years of quarrying there. It's amazing that this new fossil was sitting inside a pillar for 130 years. It could have been lost forever. Scientists will study the newly discovered piece and will examine microfossils surrounding the turtle to determine if the 2 fossils are from the same animal, as they suspect. That would be quite the find. Schofield speculates that the prehistoric species was a sea turtle similar in size to the modern-day leatherback turtle, which grows up to 7.2 feet long. It lived during the Oligocene period, which lasted from 65.5 million to 23 million years ago, when New Zealand was covered in shallow seawater. Dulce Alien Base. The town of Dulce in New Mexico doesn't look like a place where exciting things happen. It's a small town that doesn't even have a traffic light, and yet apparently, hiding underneath this sleepy desert town is an underground facility holding some of the most unbelievable wonders discovered by the U.S. military. It's believed the subterranean base at Dulce is up to 7 stories deep. It's also believed that it houses everything from human-animal hybrids to advanced technology. Some even say the Dulce base is where the military stores every piece of evidence for alien life. There are supposedly alien bodies down there, and even alien-human hybrids that the government biologically created. Stories of the base first started being told in the 1930s. Long before the alleged alien crash in Roswell, New Mexico, people thought something strange was happening in Dulce. These rumors really skyrocketed in the 1970s when New Mexico State Police Trooper Gabe Valdez documented unexplained cattle mutilations in the area. Valdez claimed he found gas masks, radar equipment, and weird glow sticks left behind with the mutilations. He also claimed to have witnessed sophisticated spacecraft hovering in the sky, and said he found a bizarre fetus inside one of the dead cows that looked like a mix between a human, a monkey, and a frog. 6593rd Test Squadron. The 6593rd Test Squadron and everything they did was classified information up until 1995. We now know that the Test Squadron carried out covert operations to recover mysterious capsules ejected from satellites orbiting the planet. These satellites were operated by both the Air Force and the CIA, designed to take images of sensitive parts of enemy territory from space. The issue back then, in the 1960s, was that they had no way to get the information from the satellite back to the people on Earth. So, reconnaissance satellites had to gather information in space and then eject capsules that would fall back to Earth. These capsules contained highly classified information that the government desperately needed. This is where the 6593rd Test Squadron came in. They flew in modified C-119J flying boxcars that came equipped with ropes, winches, and hooks. They use these instruments to snag the parachute of the ejected capsule and bring it back to base. Even more amazing is that they usually grabbed the parachute while the capsule was still falling. It was only every now and then that they had to fish the packages out of the Pacific Ocean. It was this brave team of secret airmen who brought back the Discoverer 14 payload in 1960, which contained the very first pictures ever taken of the Earth's surface from space. Vietnamese ghosts. While some were dealing with aliens, soldiers during the Vietnam War stationed in Saigon had to deal with ghosts. The building at 727 Tran Hung Dao in modern Ho Chi Minh City was used as a housing unit for American soldiers during a large portion of the war. But the story of the ghosts goes back to its original construction. It's been said that many of the workers building it died and that their spirits never left. The locals blame the number of floors for the deaths of the workers, since the building had 13 floors, and 13 is an unlucky number. Amazingly, the architect who designed the building called in a shaman to get rid of the ghosts and evil spirits that were allegedly haunting it. The shaman brought with him the corpses of 4 dead virgins and then buried one at each of the 4 corners. This was obviously a terrible idea because if the workers weren't haunting the place, the dead virgins now were. During the war, soldiers reported hearing screams in the middle of the night and seeing apparitions. Even today, people who live in the building say they sometimes see the ghost of an American soldier walking through the halls with his dead Vietnamese girlfriend. Rescued child. During the summer of 1944, one of the most disturbing discoveries of World War II was made in a cave on the island of Saipan. In a rare historical photo, a U.S. Marine discovers a near-dead baby in a cave. In the middle of the thick and humid jungle of the Pacific Island, American Marines came across a mysterious cave. They were in the middle of clearing Japanese fighters and civilians from the grottos. The people had been hiding there following the United States' swift victory over Saipan on July 9th. The Americans had destroyed about 30,000 Japanese troops and killed roughly 12,000 local islanders and Japanese civilians. It was a brutal battle, and the discovery made in the cave really put it all into perspective. During this stage in the war, the Japanese were truly afraid of the Americans. The fight for Saipan is still remembered for the Japanese civilians who jumped off cliffs to their deaths, all due to fear of being captured by the American soldiers. While the Marines were clearing out caves where the local islanders had been hiding to escape from the violence of war, they found one filled to the brim with human remains. It was one of the most horrendous things the Marines had ever seen, but it was made much worse when they pulled out the only survivor, a tiny child no more than a few months old. The baby had been crawling around alone, but was finally rescued. Hidden frescoes. A few years ago, Tufts University professor Christina Maranci discovered hidden centuries-old artwork at the Mren Cathedral, a historic church in western Armenia. While hiding from local police inside the church during her investigation of off-limits archaeological sites, she suspected that there was something beneath the plaster on the walls. Maranci snapped photos with her camera and used Photoshop to enhance the obscured features, visually restoring parts of the hidden frescoes and inscriptions that are invisible to the naked eye, including an ox in the church's apse. She believes the image is an early 11th century depiction of the biblical figure Ezekiel with an ox, lion, man, and angel, the symbols of the 4 evangelists Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But Maranci also admitted that her speculation is inconclusive for now, and that more investigating needs to be done to confirm the fresco's age and meaning. The keen-eyed researcher said she was not particularly interested in frescoes when she made the discovery, but that the finding prompted her to start investigating other old churches for similar historical features. And while she credits imaging software that anyone could use for drawing out the concealed artwork, Maranci noticed the importance of someone having knowledge of what they are looking for. She continues to investigate her findings and hopes to overcome several obstacles surrounding the discovery, including a lack of experts and governmental red tape that prevents researchers from legally exploring valuable historical sites in the region. She wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Roswell and the Great Pyramids. If you were to ask any mainstream archaeologist or historian, they would tell you how the Great Pyramids of Giza were built as tombs. But not everyone is so convinced. One of the strangest features of the Pyramid of Khufu, the biggest of all the pyramids of Giza, is a mysterious inscription. The inscription is small, a strange symbol first described by French Egyptologist M. André Pochon in 1934. It was found carved above the original gateway of the pyramid, and no one was quite sure what it meant. To be honest, we still don't know what this symbol means. But there has been rumor that the exact same symbol engraved over the gateway of the pyramid was engraved on the debris of a UFO that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in the 1940s. This is the infamous event that took place in July of 1947, when an unidentified flying object landed just outside the city of Roswell. When military personnel arrived to discover the fragments of the crashed ship, they found what appeared to be numbers and hieroglyphs engraved on the twisted pieces of metal. Classified photographs revealed by Jesse Marcel Jr. show the exact same symbol on the metal from the UFO as seen at the Khufu Pyramid. Jesse was the son of one of the military men who first showed up to investigate the wreckage. He claimed his father brought one of the pieces home to show Jesse and his mom, and they took photos of the artifact and kept them secret for years. But Jesse eventually released the photos, and he maintained their validity up until his death in 2013. If all of this is true, it could mean the Egyptians carved real alien symbols onto the pyramids. Provoking war with Cuba. One of the most haunting secret missions ever considered by the United States was in the early 1960s, when they thought about provoking war with Cuba. The top military leaders of America got together and drafted a plan to provoke fake acts of terrorism to create mass public support for a war and possible invasion of Cuba. If this sounds oddly familiar, that's because it's the exact same scheme that some people say was responsible for the 9/11 attacks in New York on the World Trade Centers. The code name for this terrible mission was Operation Northwoods. Different methods of manipulating the public were outlined in the report. Military leaders suggested sinking boats with Cuban refugees on them, hijacking planes, and even blowing up a United States ship filled with civilians. It was a sneaky way that the government could trick the American public and the rest of the international community into supporting a direct and very violent attack on Cuba. At the time, the United States desperately wanted to get Fidel Castro, and by default the Soviet Union, out of their backyard, as they hated that the communist leader was so close to American shores. They debated blowing up a ship in Guantanamo Bay filled with U.S. citizens and blaming Cuba. They understood that the more casualties there were, the more the American public would be behind them. The Joint Chiefs of Staff had all approved the plans. They were then handed over to President Kennedy's Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. This was in March of 1962 and proof that balance of powers actually works. The plans were officially rejected and then buried for almost 40 years until finally being exposed. The meth Nazis. The Nazis were the first ones to use massive amounts of methamphetamines to create super soldiers. In fact, World War II, according to Lester Grinspoon, who wrote a book in 1975 about this horrible drug, was what started the black market abuse of speed pills on a global scale. It's true that Japanese, American, and British soldiers all ate huge amounts of amphetamines to stay alert during the brutal fighting, but it was the Germans who did it the most enthusiastically, encouraging their soldiers to pop pills like candy throughout all the phases of the war. This is crazy because in Nazi ideology, drugs were a huge no-no. Drugs were considered to be proof of a person's weakness, and if they were used in the country, it was a sign of moral decay. But it was also a key part of their strategy. They had no problem peddling the drug, and it was given to soldiers to make them extremely alert and vigilant. They gave the excuse that it was perfectly fine for the soldiers of Germany to use because it made strong people even stronger. Hitler also said other drugs like opium were for weak people to escape reality. Meth hit the scene big time in Germany in 1937 under the brand name Pervitin. You didn't even need to have a prescription to buy it, meaning you could walk into a drugstore and get a box of chocolates that had drugs injected into them. It became not only a huge problem for the soldiers who got addicted to it, but also for much of Germany, with the civilians at home consuming massive amounts of what was basically meth. When the Germans invaded Poland in September of 1939, killing over 100,000 Polish soldiers in the brutal attack, they did so on industrial-strength speed. Trench treasure. In the midst of World War I, troops discovered ancient Greek treasure while digging trenches. As you may already know, trench warfare during the First World War was brutal. Fighting was done from one pit to the next, and much of Western Europe was riddled in hastily made tunnels. All this digging was sure to uncover one or two artifacts that had been lost to time. The only issue was that in World War I, archaeology wasn't such a popular subject. People didn't care that much about treasure, ancient history, or protecting lost sites. It wasn't until after the war ended and Howard Carter unveiled a tomb of Tutankhamun that the public took a shine to archaeology. Regardless if the public cared or not, plenty of relics were uncovered during the First World War. In Greece, trench diggers in multiple cities found the remains of ancient settlements and cemeteries dating back nearly 3,000 years. They uncovered copper and gold jewelry, the graves of mysterious women, and the corpses of prehistoric warriors. All this while digging trenches to protect themselves from being blown apart by artillery. Between 1918 and 1925, after the war was over, archaeologists from Britain and France tried to recover these treasures. Many of them were taken to museums across Europe. And just recently, an exhibition was put together by the Kilkis Antiquities Eforit in Greece, showcasing all the amazing artifacts recovered from the deadly trenches. Medieval tunnel. Earlier this year, electrical workers discovered a mysterious network of medieval tunnels beneath a 12th century abbey in Wales. They were digging a hole for a new power line pole in a customer's backyard. Situated along a brook, the tunnel system is just 4 feet tall, and there is no record of it being built. Archaeologists who investigated the site do not know what the tunnels were used for or how extensive the network is. They were a complete secret. It does not appear on any maps created by the UK's mapping agency, which dates back to the 18th century. So the power company had full permission to dig at an archaeological site because nobody knew that it existed. They got quite the surprise. It's possible that the tunnels are connected to nearby Tintern Abbey, a national icon of Wales that was built in 1131. The abbey fell into ruin after King Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century, which would explain the tunnel's absence in historical records. Alan Gore, a technician who participated in the discovery, said that he has been involved in other excavations where they have discovered old wells and cellars not shown on any plans, but nothing as exciting and impressive as this. The electrical work was rerouted, and archaeologists plan to thoroughly excavate the secret tunnels in hopes of uncovering their secrets. The return of the Anunnaki. According to a secret source at the Pentagon, the Anunnaki are returning to Earth. The old gods of Sumer are supposedly coming back to our planet, and the Pentagon is trying to figure out what to do about it. Believe it or not, there are a lot of big names and intelligent people who have come forward over the years saying the military does indeed have knowledge of aliens or the Anunnaki, or at least something similar. Apollo veteran Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the surface of the moon, even claimed that aliens were responsible for stopping nuclear war between America and Russia. Mitchell, who was part of the Apollo 14 mission in 1971, told Mirror Online in 2015 that the military already knew about aliens. He even claimed the aliens were watching over the White Sands facility in 1945, when the first nuclear bomb was detonated. According to Mitchell himself, he heard from multiple sources working at secret missile bases in the 20th century that they spotted UFOs frequently. They sometimes saw UFOs flying over the base, and sometimes their equipment randomly stopped working. An unidentified officer on the Pacific coast told Mitchell their missiles were even shot down by alien spacecraft hiding invisible in the atmosphere. If all of this is true, it could explain why nuclear activity stopped in the 1970s and has been relatively dormant ever since. Governments could know that even if they launch missiles, aliens will just shoot them down. But what exactly they're planning to do if the Anunnaki, or whatever the aliens want to call themselves, come back is unknown. Acoustic kitty. In the 1960s, the CIA was doing more than just trying to blow up their own people to start wars. They were also experimenting on animals. And I'm not talking just about monkeys. Operation Acoustic Kitty was when the CIA tried to turn cats into covert operatives. The CIA was completely out to lunch on this one, believing that if they trained cats properly, they could turn them into spies. The plan was to let them loose in Russia and get them to invade places where Soviet leaders were having important meetings. Because they were just cats, the Soviets would never expect that they were implanted with listening devices. If successful, the plan would allow for the military to collect secret information on the enemy. Anyone who has ever owned a cat will tell you right now that the project was not successful. Cats are not obedient animals and don't really like to be trained. Still, the CIA tried their best. They tried to get the cats to go where they wanted to by using audio cues. According to Victor Marchetti, former assistant to the director of the CIA, they went so far as to cut cats open, stuff them with batteries, and then wire them to a listening device like some kind of robotic Frankenstein's cat. It took 5 years to create a cyborg cat that would be suitable for the mission. When they tried to take the cat out on a practice run, it was hit by a taxi and killed. It never even reached the intended target. The operation was finally scrapped in 1967 after wasting tens of millions of dollars. Human trophies. There is a dark side of American history that nobody wants to talk about, and it's kind of disturbing. Did you know that after the attack on Pearl Harbor, propaganda began to spread that Japanese people were evil subhumans? When soldiers were sent out to fight, they began practicing some barbaric rituals. American soldiers started to take body parts of the killed Japanese as war trophies. The truth is that when the bodies of Japanese soldiers were returned to their homeland to be buried, over half of them arrived back in Japan without their heads. As was revealed later, the heads had been stolen by American soldiers and kept as morbid war trophies. In the jungles and islands of the Pacific, the soldiers would keep the skulls to use as warning signs or as creepy decorations around camps. Some would mail the parts home to the families as a form of revenge or psychological warfare, showing that they were not afraid. It became such a massive problem that the military had to expressly forbid it, but it still happened throughout the duration of the war. In a photo published in the May 22, 1944 issue of Life magazine, there is a woman sitting by a skull. She was a war worker and had gone home. So as a gift, her lieutenant and 13 friends sent her a skull with their autographs on it. They had written, "This is a good Jap, a dead one, picked up on the New Guinea beach." As Life magazine reported, Natalie, surprised at the gift, named it Tojo. The armed forces disapproved strongly of this sort of thing. Even today, there are still efforts to return trophies like this to their proper resting place. Lost coin. In 2021, Israeli soldiers were doing a training exercise on the slopes of Mount Carmel when a soldier named Ido Gardi noticed something peculiar. He leaned over and picked up a coin that appeared to be incredibly old. Surprisingly, the coin had the head of a Roman emperor engraved on it. The soldier handed the coin over to the proper authorities, who quickly dated it as almost 2,000 years old. Experts at the Israel Antiquities Authority were able to identify the Roman emperor as Antonius Pius. They determined that the coin came from between 158 and 159 AD. It's one of only 11 such coins that has ever been found in Israel. On one side is the head of the emperor, who ruled from between 138 and 161 AD, but on the other side is an image of the Syrian god of the moon, Mun. As for where the coin came from, it was likely minted in the city of Giva Philippi, also known as the City of Horsemen. This city was used as a base for King Herod from the Bible, and it was a stronghold for Roman soldiers during the Great Revolt between 66 and 70 AD. Ancient fish. While studying sediment cores collected from Norwegian coastal lakes, a group of geologists found the remarkably well-preserved bones of an ancient three-spine stickleback fish. After the ice sheets melted at the end of the last ice age, coastlines throughout the northern hemisphere experienced an uplift, creating inland lakes that effectively cut the species off from the ocean. The recently discovered fish lived in brackish waters around 12,000 years ago, a time when the lake it was found in was nearly, but not completely, disconnected from the sea. A new study reveals that stickleback populations in separate places evolved to survive in their new freshwater environments, experiencing similar changes in their behavior, function, and appearance, a phenomenon known as parallel evolution. Scientists typically rely on modern-day freshwater and marine species as models for learning about parallel evolution. The rare opportunity to study these types of changes in ancient species eliminates some of the guesswork that comes with differentiating modern evolutionary traits from those experienced by ancestral populations. For the study, scientists extracted DNA from 2 prehistoric stickleback fish and compared the results against modern specimens. A researcher explained that although these bones belong to sticklebacks that died thousands of years ago, when most of Scandinavia was still covered by a giant ice sheet, they still contain fragments of DNA. These genetic sequences provide us with a window into the past and to the early stages of when fish began to adapt to fresh water. In this case, the stickleback fish already contained genetic variants that made them adaptive to fresh water. These findings are helping experts to better learn the ways evolution occurs over thousands or even tens of thousands of years, helping to fill in the gaps in evolutionary timelines. Antarctic UFOs. On July 2, 1965, 18 years after the alien UFO allegedly crashed in Roswell, another UFO was discovered in Antarctica. An alien ship was seen from the Orcadas Naval Detachment in Argentina and from 2 bases operating on Deception Island. One of these bases belonged to the Chilean Air Force, the other to the United Kingdom. All 3 countries officially reported witnessing the alien craft in the sky, but only the Chilean Air Force and the Argentine Navy released the reports to the public. The UK remained silent until very recently. Documents reported and catalogued by the British Antarctic Survey recently became publicly available, and they seem to confirm the discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence at the bottom of the world. According to the newly released documents, a colored light was witnessed from the British base. It was flickering red, green, and yellow, and it moved back and forth quickly across the sky for about 20 minutes. Even crazier is that this happened less than a month after the mass sighting at the Chilean base on June 18th. A zigzagging light which changed colors was seen in the sky for approximately 15 minutes by numerous people. No one can say for sure if this report is definitive proof of alien life. All we know is that multiple military organizations operating in Antarctica have seen strange things in the sky and reported them. What interest the aliens might have in Antarctica is anybody's guess. Operation Merlin. Operation Merlin was a plan cooked up by the Clinton administration to provide Iran with fake designs for a nuclear weapon. The purpose of the mission was to delay the completion of Iran's nuclear weapons program. The CIA used a defected Russian scientist to create a flawed blueprint of a nuclear warhead that would be leaked to Iranian officials. And this secret mission wasn't that long ago, only in the year 2000. CIA documents reveal that work on the fake blueprints began in 1996, the weapon being based on the Russian TBA-480 fire set. The design for the weapon was completely legit, except in several key places that would make it flawed and not work. But the secret mission backfired. The Russian engineer hired to make the blueprints wasn't in on the scheme. He noticed there were flaws in the schematics that he himself had helped create after he already handed them over to Iran. Naturally, he told the Iranians about the flaws. Instead of setting Iran's nuclear program back, Operation Merlin actually accelerated it by providing them with extremely useful information. Since they identified the flaws immediately, they used the plans that the U.S. handed them to design real working nukes. Fugo balloon bomb. The Fugo balloon bomb is a little-known secret weapon that was developed by the Japanese in World War II. The bomb was nothing more than a hydrogen balloon carrying an anti-personnel bomb and an incendiary bomb. The balloons were designed as extremely cheap weapons that would coast effortlessly along the jet stream, traveling over the Pacific Ocean, where they would eventually burst and fall on major American cities. It was the only thing the Japanese could figure out to actually strike at the American continent. Even though these bombs were a huge failure, they are still considered to be the first intercontinental weapons. At the time, these were the longest-ranged attacks ever made in war history. Fortunately for the United States, the bombs didn't work. Because of the unpredictability of the weather, the balloons would get lost. They would explode before they ever made it to America, and none of the U.S. cities were ever decimated in the way Japan had hoped. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite weird war story? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and come back soon for another video. Bye!